Hey everyone, Mystery here, and today's goal is to decide what is the most powerful class in Darktide currently. Now, this is one of the most popular questions on the channel, and I've constantly been shifting my opinions on this over the years. This time around, we've had a lot of changes since the last time in terms of the classes, although maybe not as many changes in terms of the rankings, but there are a few in here. Now, what I am going to be doing today is, as I sort of do these rankings a little bit different every time. This time around, I have 6 categories I'm going to be talking about for each class so that you can kind of be appraised. Hopefully by the end of the discussion about each class, you'll understand why I am giving it the ranking that I am. So those 6 categories are the OP talents and abilities in the class. I think this is one of the first and foremost places where classes derive their powers. If you have just a small handful of very, very competitive talents or abilities, then you are going to be a good class. It really doesn't take many. All you need to do is facilitate the class to do what it does best. And for all of the classes, that ties in very well to the second thing, which is the weapons. If you have exceptionally powerful weapons, then duh, right? The weapons, as I've said before, are the conduit for the player power in terms of turning it into enemy death. So if you have a powerful core class, you need to have a good weapon to translate that damage into killing enemies, and that's how you win the game. So yeah, that's going to be the second thing here, is what OP weapons are on each class. And then we'll talk about ease of use. Now, I did deliberate on this for a little bit, but I did want to give sort of some thought about if this class is easy to understand, then it should make sense that this class is you can get a good amount of power out of it, if that makes any sense. However, I think this one is going to be a little bit deceptive, and it'll lead me to talking about something. The reason the power structure, I think, is trending towards the way it is because a lot of the harder classes to use are also some of the most powerful, and it's just a matter of unlocking that power. But I just wanted to give some thought in terms of how easy it is to access the full potential, at least most of the potential of the class. Then we'll talk about value added to the team, because of course Darktide is a team game, so we need to consider what is the best thing for winning the game with the team. Now, I think that you can evaluate it in your own way, but personally for me, if they were to add a new character to the game and they had a talent that just said, if you choose this talent, you automatically win the game, that's probably the best class because that class is guaranteed to win. And there are classes here that are able to lift so much of the weight of the game off the team's shoulders and just burden it, take that burden on themselves, just deal with that much threat or remove this many sort of obstacles, that they are going to lead to much higher win rates. And so those classes are going to be higher. Then we'll have counters. Now, this isn't applicable to every class, but the more counters you have, the more fatal your flaws, the lower you're going to be positioned. There's not a whole lot of classes that have strict hard counters, but there are positions where certain classes definitely don't want to find themselves in. Obstacles in terms of types of enemies or that sort of stuff. So I'll make mention of that, and the more of those that you have stacking against you, the weaker you are. And then finally, how strong is this class going to be if you invest 2,000 hours in it? And I think this is a really telling thing, because yes, a player at 2,000 hours probably isn't a de facto master of the class, but they're going to have a really, really solid level of skill to play it, and that should give you a really strong impression of how strong a class is. Because if they're playing at 98% of peak efficiency and they're able to clear the map this fast and take this little damage, well, if there's a class that's able to do it faster and more easily, then that class is going to be more powerful. So I think there's definitely classes here that can just actually solo Havoc 40s, killing every enemy no problem by themselves at 2,000 hours, and there's classes that would have to endeavor a lot to do a similar feat because they just aren't equipped in the same way. So those are the factors we're going to be considering here, and I want to make a carve out here, or make a statement, a declarative statement before I begin, which is that no class here is what I would say weak. I think that if anything, what we have is that we have a baseline of classes that are at the 90 or 100% power, and then we have classes that are far over that. We have classes all the way up to 150, 180% power, probably past the point of being reasonable in terms of what some of these guys can do, but that's just where we're at. And so I think it's important to evaluate these classes against each other, but keep in mind that in the grander scheme of it, you can complete the game, beat Havoc 40, whatever, with even the quote-unquote weakest of the classes. The weakest is still strong these days. So with that being said, if you like Darktide content and you're planning on sitting and listening to this one, well, then you should probably subscribe. And here I go. I'm gonna start yapping. So get ready. All right, let's start at the bottom, and I'm not going to make the joke this time, but let's start at the bottom. We'll go up to number 1 because that's the way that you have to do it on YouTube. And we unfortunately have to return to a similar ranking from last time around. The poor Ogryn is going to occupy this last place position, the 6th spot on the list. The reason being, well, we got a bunch of reasons here. So let's start with his talents and abilities. Now, I'm not going to be showing anything on the screen. I'm just going to show some Ogryn gameplay, but I'll talk about the talents. I'll read the talents to you. The Ogryn is pretty unique here in that I think the Ogryn is lacking any really defining talents. There's nothing on the Ogryn short of the taunt ability, which is a very, very good ability. There's nothing on the Ogryn in specific that I look at and I go, oh man, holy shit, imagine that on this class. Even within like his keystones and stuff, that I'm not impressed. And I think that is a lot of his lack of power. The reason he is not like OP is because a lot of classes in the game have tons of talents that are like kind of borderline broken or just broken. And the Ogryn has fine talents, right? But they're mostly an amalgam of some sort of like defensive / utility talents. He's got some pretty interesting ones that can shove over enemies, like 250% increased stagger push. He's got Batter, which unfortunately got nerfed. I think once upon a time, Batter would have been that talent that would be mentioning here, but now at only 1 stack per light attack and 4 stacks on a heavy, that's really not that impressive anymore. And so he's really kind of lacking for a talent-based identity. That is hurting him. So his baseline power is a little bit lower than other classes because he doesn't have these crutch talents that are giving him a huge boost. Then we got to talk weapons. Ogryn has easily the worst weapon selection in the game. I mean, just by default, right? He only has 6 melee and 6 ranged, and out of those, there's basically half stinkers, more or less. Half of those are really just not competitive at any of the higher levels in the game. And I'm not just talking about all the higher levels, but even within the stuff that the Ogryn has access to, there's some that are just way worse than others. And he just tends to feel really bad, especially with his ranged weapons, because he has a very slow time to draw. He, of course, did talk about the OP stuff that's here. He's, of course, got his Power Maul, which has recently gotten a buff, enabling you to almost one-shot like Havoc 40 Crushers and just put a ton of stuff down on the ground around it, with that massive concussive blast on a pretty reasonably short cooldown. He's got the Brank's Pickaxe, which is slow, but it does get the job done. He's got, of course, the Battle Maul, Slab Shield sort of thing. And then on the range side, it's probably just the Rumbler and the Grenade Gauntlet that I would say are kind of in the peak category for power right now, but mostly just because like those are weapons where if other classes had them, that would be nice. Like those guns would feel good in other classes. He is really lacking for anything that's quick to draw and easy to like get on target really, really fast and snap off a shot. That's been his main drawback for his range arsenal for a while, and that leads to some of his vulnerabilities we'll talk about in a second. Then we got ease of use. So Ogryn is kind of a weird one for this. I would say at low difficulties, Ogryn is among the easiest classes in the game to play and use because you can't really get trapped by enemies because you can dodge out of them. Most of his attacks completely stagger enemies, and so therefore they aren't going to be attacking you back, so you just got to kind of unga bunga your way through levels. And I made this point back when Ogryn got buffed, about a year ago, that for the lower levels of difficulty below Heresy, you could very easily solo games with Ogryn just by walking through them and left-clicking, like just light attack spamming everything, because your damage reduction was so high and your bleed damage was so high that it didn't really let anything live for more than a few moments. And that was then. Now we are seeing an era where, yeah, like you can still walk through like low level games, but when we get to higher level games, that's when his ease of use goes down. As you get into late game, you have to learn a different Ogryn than you learned in early game. Early game with Malice and Heresy and stuff, you just walk through things, unga bunga, smash your face into enemies until they die, that sort of style of play. And then when you get into Havoc, etc., He unfortunately is very vulnerable to a lot of the stuff that the game loves to do the most in order to increase difficulty, like lots and lots of specials and lots of small gunners, etc. And that means that you're gonna have to relearn the fundamentals of playing Ogryn in order to play at this different challenge rating, and that can be a little bit to get your head around. But yeah, he's overall pretty easy. There's not a whole lot of complexity here. Then we'll talk about value added to the team. The Ogryn's main value is that he's a big frontliner. He has a lot of stagger. He's generally a stall character, right? He can taunt, which means enemies can't get on anybody else except for him. He can shove, he can slam these enemies so they're laying on the ground, and he can soften them up with things like Skull Crusher, which is a very good blessing, which appears on a lot of his blunt weapons. And that allows him to augment the damage for the rest of the team. So he's kind of like a setup character. Like, he's a good character to have on the team. You'd want him on a team because he's going to make certain that stuff isn't going to run you over. He's going to make certain that you guys are the ones that are running stuff over, and you get to do all the damage while he stands up there and holds their attention. And that's great. I think that's a cool design to have in a game. The problem is that on any difficulties that aren't in that Havoc range, typically the damage for characters is so high right now that a lot of times you don't get to do the tanking, right? You end up being a kind of slow big guy who gets to the fight a little bit late, and meanwhile, all the enemies have been killed by your various ranged characters or your like super fast speedy boys, and it just doesn't feel fun to tank on these really low difficulties, where a lot of players probably prefer to play. When you get to those higher difficulties of Havoc, then you can start to tank because there's so much density that a lot of times you do need to make some space. But yeah, that's a hard balance to strike. Then counters. So the Ogryn is going to be the number one on the list in terms of the counters, the potential counters. The small shooter problem is a big issue for the Ogryn. Lots and lots of small gunners that position themselves around. They are just frustrating. They aren't worth your time to go over there and melee them. You don't really get any toughness or whatever off of going and melee them, so they will blink you down over time. Swapping to your range weapon and shooting them is almost not really a good idea either, because a lot of times your range weapon is a weapon that doesn't have a whole lot of ammo, and wasting a round wouldn't make sense, or swapping to the weapon is kind of encumbering. So yeah, I think that that's one of his major counters. And the other one that probably most people were thinking about here is specials. Oh my gosh, especially Disablers. Ogryn has the hardest time. It's so unfortunate that the Ogryn has like hell, especially in higher difficulties. With Havoc introducing waves of like 12 to 16 specials, you know, you'll get hundreds of specials in a game, and half of the like 150 or so that are Disablers. And it just takes one for the Ogryn to get himself into a bad spot. And the reason the Ogryn is so poor at this is because the Ogryn's mobility is lacking compared to the other classes. The Ogryn doesn't move or sprint slide as fast as the other boys do, and most notably, his dodge is very anemic compared to the dodge on pretty much every other class. So when you think about it, the dodge isn't really important for the overall distance that it travels, but it's more important for how much it displaces your body, what percentage of your body moves. So for the Zealot, if he moves 3 body lengths to his right when he dodges, and the Ogryn moves the same amount, but if the Ogryn's twice as wide, he's only going to move like 1 body length. So what will happen is you'll dodge, and for a normal character, that window of the dodge, you would have been well out of the way of that trapper, that dog, or that mutant. But as I'm certain many of you Ogryn players out there will know, getting winged by a mutant or a dog that you would have dodged in any other class is like part of the Ogryn experience. They will grab you when you definitely shouldn't have gotten a hit because you're so broad and because your dodges aren't that far. Now I understand why they did this, is because the dodging, if you were to scale it up to Ogryn size, it would look absurd. He would be scooting 15 feet across the arena. Now we have Hive Scum who can just do that, but that's different for some reason. But yeah, the Ogryn is uniquely vulnerable to tons of Disablers, and fortunately they have made it so that when he dodges, he gets 50% damage reduction, so that helps him to weather some of the small gunners. And then we've also made it so that, way back in the past, they made it so that when you dodge, you push smaller enemies out of your way so you're not getting surrounded and crowded on. That's all very nice, and that's the sort of stuff that the Ogryn needs more to be more competitive, because right now, mobility is his worst enemy. And how strong are you at 2,000 hours? I mean, as I said before, you can solo like content at 2,000 hours probably, right? You're going to be very strong. However, the limiting factor for the Ogryn here is, first of all, he's pretty damn slow, right? In order to get to these enemies and like win the game solo for your team, you're plodding along, right? You've got every other class in the game that can move faster than you, and you are also, still just only able to beat enemies with your melee. That's pretty much the peak power for the class, is being able to hit enemies in melee. You can deal okay damage at that, but it's nothing really to write home about. So yes, you will be a strong player who CCs and controls everything, but I don't know if I would immediately look at an Ogryn who's got 2,000 hours and is playing a near perfect Ogryn game and differentiate it from a player who's playing it somewhat less potential in that, because it's really not like a huge wealth of like how do I say this? There's not like a huge like secret learning curve with like this esoterical knowledge at the end of the timeline for Ogryn that you only unlock when you get 1,000 hours. He kind of like hits his peak at a certain point, and then his peak just is there. He's limited by the physical reality of how slow he is right now. Being slow in Darktide right now sucks. I'll make the point. Every class that's good right now, that the faster classes, the better, because meta is movement. Moving and evading enemies and positioning is all the game. That's how you win. And so the Ogryn being unable to do that effectively is going to be in last place, unfortunately. Now we're going to go past him to the 5th place candidate. Only a little bit different here. It's the Arbites. I don't remember if I ranked the Arbites at the Zealot here last time, but the Arbites is getting this spot because the Arbites is lacking in 2 things that the Zealot does have. We'll touch on those. Let's first talk about his talents and abilities. The Arbites actually does have quite a host of very solid talents here. He, of course, has Shock Mines, a very standout ability, or Blitz rather, being able to control hordes. That's a very valuable reason to bring in Arbites. He has the Lone Wolf Keystone, or like mid Keystone, that can get rid of his dog and then give you more Shock Mines over time, which is just very valuable for high level content. But also the dog is valuable, so like I can't discount the dog. If you're a capable dog handler and you can get them to attack the right targets at the right time, you can generate a lot of value for the team, as we'll talk about for the value added to the team section. For other talents and abilities, his charge, his break the line is a very solid ability. That's probably the one I'll talk about here when I'm considering the strongest potential Arbites is going to be using that charge ability. It really does work well with his intentional design, which is to be a frontline tank, CC machine. He's going to put these enemies on the ground, and they're not going to be able to get up. He's going to bludgeon them to death into a pulp before they even do. You and the rest of your team as well. So he's great at being the first one in and knocking all his enemies down and creating space, creating disruption. He's a disruptor just like the Ogryn is. And in terms of other like abilities here, of course, we got to mention Concussive, which is one of the main ways that he can generate value. Concussive is a talent that makes it so when he hits a headshot on an enemy, they count as being staggered for the next 4 seconds. And this on its own doesn't seem that crazy, but what it does is it enables all the other talents on every tree across the game, which there are lots of them on different classes and on different weapons, that can grant additional damage to staggered enemies, namely Skull Crusher, which can occur on as a blessing on his, not his maul, but just the general shock maul, or if you have an Ogryn at your side, a lot of Ogryns are running weapons that have Skull Crusher. So that will immediately boost your boss damage by like 80 to 100%. It's really, really powerful, and it's a great way to provide use of the team because, yeah, that one of his weaknesses is bossing, is dealing damage to large health targets like bosses. In terms of weapons, he does have some pretty solid weapons here. I would say that he has a much much more solid weapon arsenal than the Ogryn does. He has the Arbites maul, he has the maul and shield, he has the regular shock maul. All those are really, really good weapons, especially on him. Of course, 2 of those are exclusive. Then for range, he's of course got his executioner shotguns. He's got the bolt pistol. He's got the bolter. Yeah, he's not hurting. I would say that overall his ranged choices are a little bit weaker, but they're certainly plenty strong for what he needs to do, which is just pull the shotgun out and kill one trapper every now and then. He has that covered where the Ogryn really doesn't, right? He can pull out his shotgun and go boom, and then that flamer, that trapper's now dead. And the Ogryn would be struggling to deal with that same situation because of his slow swap times and all that stuff. And I think it's about all for his weapons. Let's talk ease of use. This has got to be the easiest class in the game to use. This is probably the most unga bunga class. Now, it's been downgraded a little bit since the age of yore when he was introduced back, 9 months ago or so. But this class has such good passive regeneration of its toughness and good damage reduction in general, and it's got plenty of ways of staggering enemies. And generally, the easiest classes in the game to play are the ones that can stagger enemies very easily, because then the enemies don't get to counterplay. So even newer players will play with these staggering classes, and they'll get the sense that they're very powerful because the enemies don't get to hit you back. So you'll survive more, right? So in surviving, if everybody survives the game, you've won the game by default, right? As long as you survive and walk to the end, you win. And I think that is a big portion of why players find him to be very powerful. But in terms of actual power, there are some limits to what he can do. Value added to the team here, of course, we mentioned the shock mines. Those are really, really good for the team. Staggering, being a stagger-based tank, is very good for team play and holding the line like that. But then also the dog. The dog is a very solid asset for the team if you are interested in playing with the dog, because he can guaranteed pin targets. He can knock disablers off of your allies. He can do all sorts of stuff, and he creates disruption wherever he goes. Just a nice, valuable addition to have, dog or shock mine or whatever you want to do. His counters, I would say, are high health targets. If the game starts to spam lots of crushers, lots of bosses, this is where he really gets slowed down. So moment to moment, especially back when Arbites hadn't been sort of scaled down as he has now, you wouldn't really notice that he had any deficiency in damage. He was actually quite competent at damage. But now, especially after he has had sort of a death by 1,000 cuts, the same as Ogryn has, where over the course of the last year, Patriarch had done these small little nerfs to these characters, these two guys, well, mostly the Arbites, struggles to deal effective damage to bosses like monstrosities, because he just doesn't have any way to stack up damage against them. The Ogryn at least gets bleeds, etc., but the Arbites can just hit them over and over with his mace, which doesn't have a huge damage boost on it. It's a good amount of damage to many small enemies, right? His mace and lots of his weapons have good, strong base damages, and therefore they can overwhelm and kill small enemies in 1 or 2 hits. But then you get into these larger targets that don't get crowd controlled, that don't have just a few hits worth of HP, and you'll be there all day fighting them. And I think that's the main factor that's limiting the Arbites right now, is he just doesn't have the potential upper end damage output. As you'll see with many of our best characters in the game, their potential DPS that they can deliver across all targets in the field is kind of unlimited. One of them literally unlimited, right? They can just deliver so much damage to so many different targets with very little effort, and in order to get even a portion of that, the Arbites is going to have to go all in, meleeing this enemy, blocking, dodging, etc. That's just not a fun time for him when it's a bunch of bosses. And he'll do it. He'll be safe doing it, but he'll just take forever, a lifetime to do it. Now, how strong are you at 2,000 hours on the Arbites? Arbites is another one of these characters where I think that the Arbites has a super flat progression curve. I think you could probably master everything there is to know about the Arbites and playing with him within a couple hundred hours, and then you would just do slight refinements over the next thousands or so. Again, just like with the Ogryn, I could probably tell a little bit better what a performative Arbites is able to do here, a very, very strong Arbites is able to do here, notably because Arbites are humanoid classes, and therefore they have more agile movements than the Ogryn. He can get more stuff done per second because he can swap his weapons faster and move around and be more effective in combat like that, but he just has a cap, right? He has a cap on what he can do because he is a martial class. And this is a terminology that I realized I haven't used since the last time around where I did this video, but I have taken to referring to the upper 3 classes and the lower 3 classes as the caster and the martial classes, respectively. And this is a reference to the Dungeons and Dragons system, where there's a set of classes that are quote-unquote martial, and they are physical fighters, and then the caster classes use spells and magic to dispatch enemies and fight. And those two are not created equally. So we'll talk about, now that we've done everything there for the Arbites, we'll talk about our last martial class. And the last martial class, the last class in the game right now that predominantly does their fighting with just their strength and their weapons, is the Zealot. The Zealot is definitely a martial class. 95% of his contribution to any game is going to be from how many enemies he hits with his sword. And he's pretty dang good at that, though, to be quite honest with you. But he doesn't ascend to the next tier because he doesn't have a whole lot of abilities or utilities outside of just really hitting that stuff good with the sword. Let's start with the OP talents and abilities. The Zealot, in terms of his talents and abilities, is very, very evasive and defensive. He is one of the harder classes in the game to pin down and actually kill. He is the safest class in the game to dive the back line and disrupt the enemies with, because he has so many get out of jail free cards. Notably, he has Until Death and Holy Revenant, which can stop you from dying on like what would be a death blow for 5 seconds, and then you can regenerate 25% of your HP, and then you can rinse and repeat 2 more minutes later on, you can do it again. And what that allows you to do is, normally when a class gets blown up and takes a bunch of silly damage early on in a game, you are then playing very sort of timidly until the next Medicae can come up, right? You don't want to get downed or killed because you are being too risk-taking. But being risk-averse is also a good way to not maximize your damage potential, not maximize your play potential. So the Zealot can play as if he's got 9 lives, like he's not even worried about getting killed or dying, because he really shouldn't be. Because if you have your Until Death up, there's a very, very small chance that you're actually going to be able to be killed in any given engagement, because you get a 5-second window during which time you can get the fuck out of there and get your toughness back and stuff, because most of the Zealot, actually all of the Zealot's abilities regenerate a ton of toughness when he uses them. So I believe that brings us to talking about his actual abilities. All 3 of his abilities are very good here. I think the weakest of the bunch is probably the Zealot Charge, but even that one is very strong. 50% of your toughness back, do a big wallop hit that cleaves through armor. Very good, probably the standard way to play the Zealot. But then we have Shroud Field, which allows you to just go invisible and fuck off once every 30 seconds for 5 seconds, and that can be lowered, of course. This is like, kind of cheesy, right? The Zealot can just repeatedly go invisible over and over again. And this is what I was talking about, is the Zealot is impossible for enemies to pin down. Just when you think you have him, he can dodge and he can slide. He actually has very high mobility, so he'll dodge and slide out of there. He'll get his toughness back from dodging with the talent Second Wind. He can then, if he's really feeling cornered, he can then use his stealth, disengage from everything, then re-engage, and then by the time the enemies have coalesced around him, they're about to punish him again, he re-vanishes and repeats the cycle. So it's very easy for players to solo games with the Zealot because, yeah, he can just stealth and drop everything repeatedly. So that's very overpowered. And then I can't mention the pinnacle of the class's power. The thing that is borderline something you would see on one of the caster classes is the Chorus of Spiritual Fortitude. This is one of the most powerful classes, or most powerful weapons in the game. I said it wrong twice, but the most powerful abilities in the game. I think I ranked it as the 2nd most powerful ability. It's a ability that tells everything in the game for the next 10 seconds, only my allies get to act. And also, they are going to get their full toughness back, and they're going to get gold toughness, so they're immune to damage for the next 10 seconds afterwards. So yeah, this is a massive game changer, and the Zealot could literally contribute 0 damage to a team and bring this and still be an invaluable asset. So yeah, that I can't not mention that ability is on par with some of the abilities in the upper echelon of classes, as we'll see, and in fact it's above some of them. But it is attributed, it's tied to a class that doesn't have a whole lot of other things that are otherworldly powerful. And let's not say that he's weak at all, because of course he has some really good weapons here. He's got the Eviscerator, he's got the Dueling Sword, he's got the Katachan Combat Blade, he's got, this guy has a pretty deep bench, honestly, of melee weapons, but the ones he tends to stick around are that Dueling Sword. It's really, really good. The Eviscerator. I see a lot of Relic Blade. I almost forgot the Relic Blade. How could I? Of course, the Mark II, the best Relic Blade. And yeah, the Relic Blade and all those weapons are very good. They do solid damage into all targets. He's a good bossing character, and he is very easy to use. We'll say the next one. I think that the Zealot is a class that you can have a good grasp of the basics and perform at a Havoc level within less than 100 hours of playing him, I would say, because all you need to do, as compared to the other 2 classes which are easier than him, is you need to learn about dodging. That's the only thing that he has as a prerequisite for unlocking his value. compared to the other two classes, which can just like kind of like stagger stuff and never worry about dodging. They just take it to the face. The Zealot is the first class that we'll talk about here, who is configured to dodge tank more, which is fortunate for him. This actually plays to his advantage because at low difficulties, you can just take damage, right? You can stagger enemies, they're very easy to stagger, and then you can just take the damage to your face because they do so little damage and you have so much damage reduction and regen, you're all good. But when you get to higher difficulties, there is no such thing as tanking in Darktide. You must dodge or block attacks, and that's the only ways you can really survive at high levels. Even an Ogryn with full damage reduction, curios, whatever, will get turned into fine Ogryn mist by a few gunners once he's up there at Havoc 40. So learning to dodge and having strong abilities centered around dodging is really important for the Zealot's identity, and therefore he does like retain a lot of that stuff into late game. And so if you can learn that, you're all good to play the Zealot. His value added to the team here, he is just a really good backline diver. He's just always able to get there and get the save. He's got the fastest revive speed in the game. He's got an additional 25% revive speed, so he's like the best guy to go for a pickup. He also has Chorus, which of course is like the king support ability in the game, just allowing your whole team to do whatever they want. And he also can clear corruption. He can provide 10% crit rate to everybody on the team using his Blazing Piety, Keystone. Yeah, he's just solid all around, although I don't think that he is really a team-oriented character generally. He is just kind of a solid standalone character who can then come in to support you in a pinch, which is nice. His counters, I would say the Zealot's counters is just the typical counters you'll face with many classes. He doesn't deal very well with large amounts of like enemies, like crushers or whatever, right? He still is a martial class, so his options are to use the flamethrower and hopefully kill some of them, or to pull out that old dueling sword or whatever and go to town and kill them all one by one, and that can take a long time. It can very much limit like how much you can get done, and so a big scary pack of rotten armor or something like that, which is all crushers and maulers, etc., that can be you'll get it killed eventually, but it's going to be a daunting task for the Zealot to do because he has to do it manually. And then how strong are you at 2,000 hours? Again, a 2,000 hour Zealot would be very impressive. They have the movement speed to be around the map, to be diving the back line. I highly doubt they would be able to be killed because, I mean, like, how are you going to kill the guy that can just go stealth every 15 seconds and then it gets like 10 seconds of like damage reduction? Yeah, it's very, very hard to pin down and kill this guy, and a solo Zealot or like a skilled Zealot could very easily just solo bosses, solo objectives with stealth, etc. And yeah, you're going to be super, super strong. However, you do still have those martial limits, like how much you can kill, how much of the hordes you can be killing is, again, it's capped. There's a cap to how much damage you can do on this class because it's a function of how often you can put yourself up in melee range with an enemy that you can hit. And if you can't do that, then you're running around all over the place, and that's going to lower your like how effective you can be. But not to say he's not effective, but as we'll see when we swap to this next set of classes, the top 3 classes in the game, we have a different set of rules, a different paradigm we're playing by, because these characters, these are the caster characters. Why are they called casters? Well, because just like the casters in Dungeons and Dragons, they don't do their fighting manually most of the time. What they do is they use their really, really powerful talents and abilities and blitzes, etc., to just deal untold amounts of damage, and then they switch over to the martial side. So basically these classes are every bit as powerful as our martial characters, but then they've got a ton of additional goodies piled on top. And the one that I think demonstrates this the best, and the one that is the 3rd place position, is the Veteran. So the Veteran has dropped down 1 from where he was last time around, and that is just because the other classes have retained being even better, and they are the Hive Scum and the Psyker are just really, really, really strong, and I couldn't deny any longer. The Veteran also got a very slight nerf, 10-second nerf to his shout ability, his voice of command ability, which is, as we'll talk about here, we're talking about his OP talents and abilities. This has got to be chief among them. This is the most powerful ability in the entire game. Even with a 10-second nerf, it's still the most powerful ability in the entire game, just because it is instantaneous. It rejects everything around you. It shoves it all to the ground. It makes space for you and your team. It resets your toughness state, and it gives you a 10-second buff during which you and your team get augmented defenses through gold toughness. So yeah, this ability is single-handedly like a great reason to bring a veteran to a game because it's insane. It will raise your win rate massively by bringing this versus bringing a more DPS focused ability like Execution Order or Executioner Stance or Infiltrate. That being said, other stuff in this class, I think it mainly revolves around a couple major things. First of all, this class is really, really good at regenerating its toughness when it's not being meleeed on. So this class can get 5% of its toughness back per second all the time, and it has a 50% additional toughness damage reduction when it's over 75% toughness, which of course counts that over cap of 50 from Veteran Shout. So what this ends up doing is you can just stand at range and shoot everything, and they try to shoot you back, but you just kind of shrug off the damage all day. And that means that, yeah, he's the premier long-range killer. He is the class that is the most capable of just like counter-sniping and taking out every special that shows up. He also does very solid boss damage and stuff through a lot of these talents. But yeah, he's keeping himself at very long range for these extremely long-range engagements, and that is, of course, very strong, right? Whereas the Zealot has to run his ass all around the arena to kill all these enemies, the veteran can plant their ass in one spot and just shoot everything from that one position. So getting yourself in the right position to shoot is the only challenge, and then you just got to kill everything before it gets to you. Now, if it does get to you, so what'll happen is you get into a game and you've got your plasma gun, you got your recon las gun, you got your las pistol, whatever, all those S tier, god tier weapons that he has access to, and then stuff will march towards you. You'll kill all the small stuff. So gunners and ragers and maulers, they all die to those weapons very easily. But then you got your crushers and your bulwarks, right? Those things will make it through. Well, then you've got your grenades. And so the second big thing about this class is that he is a ammunitions printing facility. He has the ability to manufacture grenades in the field somehow. I don't know. He makes it from like dust or something. So what he has is he has 4 talents that synergize to make the grenade veteran like oppressively good. He's got Grenadier, which gives you an additional size in your pocket, so you can hold 4 instead of 3 of crack grenades, which are the sort of dominant grenade we'll be talking about. And then you've also got the Demolition Stockpile, which gives you 1 grenade every 60 seconds on a timer. Just keep them coming. And then you've got the I forget what it's called, but it gives you an extra boost to the damage of the grenades, and that gives the crack grenades a 75% damage boost. That actually puts them high enough to one-shot even Havoc 40 Rotten Armor Crushers, which is a really, really high threshold to clear. This does like, you know, somewhere on the order of like 7,500 damage to bosses. So yeah, these grenades are obscenely powerful. And then this is even considering the last grenade talent, which is called Demolition Team. Demolition Team turns 5% of all elites or specials killed by you or your team into more grenades. So if you kill 20 elites or specials, or you or anybody in coherency with you kills 20 elites or specials, then you will get 1 grenade, roughly, on average. It's the 5% chance, so you could get 2 or you could get none. But what this does is that over the course of a 40-minute Havoc 40 game, what you'll see is that, first of all, 40 minutes have elapsed, so you've generated 40 grenades through Demolition Stockpile, and then you get 5% of all those elites and specials. Well, over the course of a game, the elite and special total on Havoc 40 in like a 40 or 30 minute game is over 1,000. Like, it's very, very high. And because this is the way the enemies are scaled in the game, this is the way the difficulty scales, the more elites and the more specials the game sends at you, that's just the veteran just eating, nom, 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 nom. And he says, give me those fucking grenades. And so for every 20 of them that you get shot down, you print 1 crack grenade. And then you've got the 1-minute timer ticking in the background. So then you end up just always having these on hand. So the veteran has unlimited supplies of these grenades. And so this is where he is a caster, right? Not only does he have this magical shove that when like enemies get near him, he just goes, no, everything lies down, right? But then he gets to start every engagement by just throwing out like 4 crack grenades that immediately annihilate any scary targets at all. And then all the time he's shooting his recon las gun or his plasma gun, basically shooting Eldritch Blast all over the place. And that is also free because he has perfect ammo sustain thanks to Survivalist. He also has things like Shock Trooper, which can give him infinite las gun ammo if you're hitting crits, which you often are because crits are good. And then underneath all of that, right? So all that happens first, right? The enemy has to survive the shooting, then they have to survive the grenades, and then they have to get close to you when you're shouting them down to the ground and then get to you. And then finally, you can swap to melee. And fortunately for the veteran, he is also just as proficient at melee as he is at range generally. He has access to the dueling sword. He has access to the power sword Mark 6. Like, these swords are incredibly powerful, and he is he's strapped. Like, he can actually put out melee damage. So he's not slacking. You would think that a range character would be very strong at range, but when you corner him, when you get him like 1v1ing a crusher, he wouldn't be able to do it. But no, this guy can drop a crusher as fast as anybody else can because he also has really strong melee buffs somewhere in his tree. And this is all on top of like yeah, just other stuff we'll talk about in a second when we talk about the value added to the team. Like I said, I don't want to beleaguer the veteran too much. So OP weapons, we talked about the dueling sword, the power sword, the plasma gun, the recon las, the las pistol, etc. Ease of use, I think this character is pretty damn easy to use, especially if you are just using shout. That's the de facto way to play with him. Just shout everything and then just, you know, just be safe underneath all that. Anytime things get scary, just throw out a big old shout, and all you got to do is aim and shoot enemies. He's a little bit harder than the other characters because, again, he has less stagger and he's a little bit more frail, but as long as you are acquiring targets and removing them before they get to you, he is the superior class in the game at removing specials, etc., which I think is part of value added to the team. So this class is the best special killer in the game. He is able to acquire these targets and eliminate them at long range nearly instantly. He gets more cooldown back when he kills specials, so it's intended that he is the special like sniper and eliminator. And by removing those enemies, he's going to make the team way safer. Plus, he's then providing shout and keeping everyone's toughness up. He's also maybe perhaps providing focus target, which gives everyone damage buffs and debuffs enemies to make them take more damage. And then he can just generally supply tons of ammo to the team through Survivalist Aura, which is going to counter the ammo scarcity on Havoc 40 like in a massive way. And he doesn't ever have to take any grenades for himself because he has free grenades printed. And speaking of grenades, he also has the improvised field improvisation, which can make it so that when you drop an ammo crate or a health crate, it cleanses your corruption or it gives you extra grenades on the ammo crate. And that is very valuable for the Hive Scum, as we'll talk about in a second. So yeah, this class provides immense value to the team. I think that the veteran is probably hands down the strongest support character if you wanted to orient towards only support right now, because he can top his team's toughness, he can give them damage buffs, he can give them resources. Like, he's got it all covered. He's like just like printing value for the team. And then we have to talk about counters. The veteran, his weakness is being cornered in melee, right? So if you're ever playing with like Executioner Stance veteran, one of the ways you can very easily die here is by getting too like laser focused, like tunnel visioned on what you're shooting, and then getting surrounded or flanked in melee. And if you don't have good spatial awareness or know where you are in the map, you'll get your shit beat. And basically, once your toughness gets hit in melee, you stop regenerating it because you lose your constant regeneration when you've been hit in melee recently. And then if you get your toughness below 75%, you lose Iron Will, which gives you 50% of your toughness, or 50% toughness damage reduction when you're above 75. So you become very, very vulnerable. So basically, the second you get hit in melee and get chipped in terms of toughness in veteran, it's an oh no moment. Fortunately, veteran has the counter to that counter, which is just using shout. And this is why shout is such the default choice on him, because he can still do like 85-90% of his potential damage playing as a shout veteran, but it sort of insulates you against all the stuff that could potentially kill you as veteran. You don't want stuff to get to you. You want to shoot it from a distance. Well, guess what prevents stuff from getting to you? It's the big yellow ability that like puts everything on the ground. Yay. And how strong are you at 2,000 hours? So this is where we're going to really start to see the uptick in terms of how strong you are. presumably at 2,000 hours, you would have nearly immaculate aim, right? You would be able to cross-map all these specials and trappers. You would be throwing crack grenades immediately as soon as you saw crushers and bosses and stuff get spawned in. You're going to be using your focus target correctly. You're going to be getting headshot. You're going to be very safe in melee, and you're also going to be aware of your positioning, because like positioning would be the weakness of a ranged character like this. And basically, for the remaining characters here, if you master positioning and dodging and evading, you are going to become a god, because these characters aren't as tanky on their face as the lower characters, but that's okay because they aren't planning to get hit. They are planning to stay the fuck away from everything and just shoot it all to death, or just dodge it all to death. And that is why the veteran has a talent, or has a penance or achievement in the game for completing a game without taking any melee damage, because he is expected to be able to do this sort of thing, to just clear through the whole thing without ever getting hit. And yeah, that's a trend we'll see continue as we move on up to our number 2 spot, which this time around is the Hive Scum. The Hive Scum is ascendant here. He's moving on up, and now he's had a ton of overhauls and reworks in the last, how long has he been out? 5 months or so, 4 or 5 months. And what they've really done to him is they have erased the learning curve, or removed a lot of the learning curve. Previously on Hive Scum, he was actually very difficult to get value out of for a lot of players because he wasn't survivable enough. So players were just getting their shit kicked in immediately, and a lot of players were saying that Arbites is still the most powerful class in the game because they could actually survive on this guy. And the problem being is that, like, you know, players on average are not very good at Darktide. Darktide's a hard game, right? So if you produce a character that doesn't have any safety built into it, then what's going to happen is, yeah, the players are going to get beat down. They're going to have no way of generating any value on this character. So, like, you know, myself included, I was not good enough to play. However, what they've done over time is they've added more and more defenses to this class, but at the same time, they've been buffing its offenses. So we have gone from having a glass cannon to a blank double cannon. Like, this cannon is even bigger caliber, and we've removed all the glass from it. So this character is actually very strong defensively now, and he is hyper evasive. And as we talked about earlier, being evasive is like the genuine W for surviving in late game. So let's start with OP talents and abilities. So many here, so many. So the Hive Scum, of course, we got to talk about his blitzes. He has 2 genuinely overpowered blitzes, the rocket launcher and the chem grenade. Even the blackouts are okay, but the rocket launcher and the chem grenade are so good to the point where players will pass by a pack of grenades. They'll have like 2 out of 4 grenades. They'll pass by the pack and they'll run to the next room 100 yards ahead. They'll throw their grenades, then they'll turn around and run back, get the grenades, then they'll run back to the room they were in. And it takes like an extra 90 seconds, but that's how impactful these grenades are. Like 2 extra grenades is worth it for these things, because they are like the panacea. Got a big ass pack of crushers or whatever, just boom, it's all gone. As you'll probably see in some of the footage here, like you erase a whole horde for free. And same thing with chem grenades, but it's everything lower than crushers. It's going to walk through it for the next 15 seconds, and it's going to go bye-bye. It's going to get incinerated. So yeah, that brings me to other OP abilities. We of course have to talk about Rampage, which is the single like strongest melee, single strongest like DPS buff in the game. Rampage gives you, with all the talents and stuff included, about 2.1x increase overall to your DPS, and that's absurd for the class that already has as high a damage as it does, because that's a multiplier on top of everything else. So yeah, this is that's a really big, and it increases your toughness is in like your damage reduction as well. So this is a super strong ability that has near all uptime. Like it's about a 10 or 15 second cooldown, all things told, and it's just so good. Then we also have Stim Supply, which can apply your stims. I didn't even mention the cartel specials yet, but basically, being able to provide the effects of a red stim to everybody on the team, including yourself, every 45 seconds is not balanced. This is something that you'd hold a red stim for a Psyker to use their flame staff on a big horde so that they could do extra damage, etc. Now you can just pump this constantly. And Darktide, in terms of like winning Darktide, it's a battle of like how much does the enemy spawn versus how fast can you kill. And if you can tip that scale, if you can put your finger on that scale and say, you know what, my whole team is going to be killing more than 20% faster now, then you're going to win those encounters so much quicker. You're going to clean up everything in the encounter that much quicker, and then you're going to be able to move farther in the interim and win your games. And yeah, that just is awesome. Plus, it protects you against corruption and cleanses your corruption. Super, super strong set of abilities there. So he's got those. And then just let's talk about his blue talents. He, of course, has some really like stupid levels of defense they've granted him. They've put him up to the top of the tree now, so you're always getting Burst of Energy. You're always getting Tis by the Scratch. These talents, Burst of Energy gives you 50% of your toughness back when your toughness would break. So you would go to 0, and then you go back to 50 immediately. And it prevents you from being stunned for the next 6 seconds. So like sometimes you would, on Veteran, you'd get like blown up. You lose all your toughness instantly, and then you can't move, and you get killed from there, right? Because you can't get your character sprinting or dodging. This prevents that, so you might take some chip damage, but you're going to be able to get away from the situation. At the same time, Tis by the Scratch replenishes 10% of your toughness per second, every second for 3 seconds when you take a ranged hit. So what normally characters would do is like they get hit in range and they'd be like, fuck, now I need to like dodge or I need to hit something in melee so I can get my toughness back. But this character can just shrug that off because you're going to dodge most range attacks anyway because you're so evasive. But when you do get planked by something, you can just stay on the defensive and just passively get that toughness back, and that is so good. If Ogryn had this talent, he would be like so happy to have this talent. It would be so good on him. Then from there, we of course have all of our really like solid nimble and alley rat. Being able to dodge like crazy distances and having longer dodges is very, very good. As I mentioned previously, dodging is king. If you can evade damage, do, and evading is hypercritical on him. Like it's so good. And speaking of hypercritical is okay, but more I'm about hyper violence, and this is the last one I'll talk about for the talents here. Hyper violence breaks this class wide open in terms of melee, because what it allows you to do is ignore the recommended damage value on your daggers or whatever, and just make it whatever larger number you want. Basically, it just adds in damage from the kills you just got, and this scales your damage in really absurd ways. And this makes the Hive Scum the foremost, most insane melee fighter in the game right now. Now, talking about OP weapons, we gotta talk about the shivs, of course. The shivs are like, you know, just like bonkers, broken, stabby. He's also got the Katachan combat blade. He's got the bone saw, which I think is pretty damn good as well. But then bone saw is good because it applies toxin, and toxin is something that is so imbalanced in this class. Toxin is a big part of why this class, I call it a caster class. It's like toxin and the grenades and stuff, right? Because, you know, a lot of it's like martial. You're getting up there, you're mailing stuff, but guess what he can also do? He can also just use this thing called the needle pistol, and then or just toxin in general with stacking with the what's it called? With the bone saw. And toxin is a damage over time effect that, unlike flames or bleeds or soul blaze, it does nearly full damage against armored targets. So crushers go bye-bye, like they just melt. And that's where the needle pistol comes in. The needle pistol is such a strong weapon that you can literally go into a game, and when a boss shows up, if you shoot the boss 5 times and then that's all you do to contribute damage to that boss, I'm pretty certain you do like 40,000 damage to it. Like that's how powerful, how much damage this damage over time stack effect does. It's so strong that it one-shots every enemy in the game. It's not a mauler or a crusher, I believe. Maybe like a bulwark survives too. But yeah, like this is damage over time effect that is just eats enemies away, and you can replenish it forever using your pickpocket talent by going and getting a melee kill to replenish 20% ammo. But yeah, this is a problematic thing, like having this level of toxin, and they've just added a whole nother tree to this class that has more focus on toxin and can spread more toxin, and therefore you're going to be getting even more of this nasty goop on the enemies that just kills them. And that's how you like scale your damage even further. Is like you can be doing all that melee damage. You can be doing 2 times the melee damage of any other class at the same time as you have a bunch of toxin stacks ticking on a separate group of enemies that's dealing, like a half of what you're dealing already. And then if things get really hairy, you pull out a rocket launcher and you delete everything for 100,000 damage. Yeah, you'll finish games with Hive Scums who didn't use any range attacks except for the rocket launcher, and they'll have 1,000,000 damage. Like, it's crazy. So like, yeah, this class is part like a very strong core martial capability. Like, he's the strongest melee fighter in terms of damage output and fleet of footness, but also he can like cast fireballs. He can literally just cast fireballs. So he's like he's 6 levels in fighter and then 6 levels in mage too. So kind of crazy, or wizard, whatever. So yeah, that's where the old Hive Scum is at right now for his OP weapons and abilities. Let's talk about his ease of use. Probably the second hardest class in the game to use right now. His extra defensiveness that they added in has really helped his ease of use. It's making players see him as powerful as he is now, because they can actually survive like 2 seconds, even me. And then value added to the team. Most of this value is going to come from the ability to just delete entire everythings with your grenades, and also the stim supply. Right, there is such a thing as contributing to value to the team through just immense amounts of DPS, and that's what he really offers here. Is he's just a buku crazy ass deeps pumper. And then counters, man, it's how do you counter this guy, right? You can't pin him down. He's so fast. He's actually quite resilient. He's got effectively unlimited ammo, right? So you would have to run this guy out of grenades and then corner him with some massive horde, but even then you could needle pistol and swap back and forth and just outrun everything forever. Yeah, I think that like there probably isn't any real counter to this. How strong are you at 2,000 hours? Ungodly strong. I don't think anybody would probably have 2,000 hours yet, considering this game, this character's only been out since December. God, I hope that you don't have 2,000 hours in this character at this point, guys. Please help you if you do. But the 2,000 hour player here would be able to do so much, because your action speed, your action economy on this character is bonkers. You can needle pistol like 3 different like elites or specials, and then shoot the boss 3 times and get him cooking, and then you can fight a whole horde with your rampage, and then you can be off stabbing the boss, and then you can see a big pack of crushers and coming in and rocket launcher it or toxinate it. You can be doing like, you can be fighting effectively like 3 fights at the same time with the amount of damage this character can put out, and just erasing targets as fast as they show up. Yeah, that's the level that you can play out here, and he's so fast and so evasive. It'll be very easy to like just steamroll him out, just get way ahead of your team and just blow everything up, no problem. And yeah, that's it for Hive Scum. But I think all this really, like, it's great and all, but it still requires like playing the game, right? Like, he's still playing the game. He's still meleeing is the vast majority of the way he does his damage, and that is something that the Psyker, it does not have to do. And so the Psyker is going to sit at the top spot yet again. The Psyker does not fundamentally interact with Darktide in the same way the rest of the characters do. The Psyker is predominantly interested in sitting at about 20-30 feet back and just blasting. That's all the Psyker really wants to do, is cast and blast, and they can literally just do that forever. So I'll talk here about the Psyker's talents and abilities, and I want you to notice that there are very few talents and abilities on this class that are really like all that notable at all. But because of the power of the abilities and the weapons and the talents in question, that it works together to make this very tight-knit, like small amount of like this core set that just gives the Psyker everything they need to just run roughshod over the game. So the first one we'll start here. We'll start with the abilities on the Psyker. So the Psyker has like 3 really like S tier abilities. We've got the bubble, the Telekine shield. That's good, but I think it's more like a crutch kind of ability. It's good for like team play. It'll help your team, but effectively at some point, like, you know, you might graduate past that. Scryer's Gaze is a DPS buff that rivals the Rampage buff, which should really tell you something. The downside here being that it doesn't really work with the most, well, it kind of works, but it's not the most synergistic thing with the most OP way you could possibly play with the class, which is casting. The Scryer's Gaze boosts your criticals and headshots, all that sort of stuff. And it works exceptionally well with Disrupt Destiny, which is a keystone down at the bottom that gives you even more headshots and finesse damage. So you're going to end up like annihilating enemies if you can aim at all. And it makes melee Psykers incredibly formidable. But then we have Venting Shriek, which I think might be among the most powerful of these abilities. So Venting Shriek can just constantly be crowd controlling enemies because it is a stagger, it's a knockback, and it also applies 6 stacks of Soul Blaze when it's capped out at 85% peril before you vent. So this is also a way to dump your peril as you've been building it up by repeatedly using your staff. And that is like really all there is to the abilities, is just we want to be enabling ourselves to cast and blast. And so speaking of that, there's only one thing more that we need for this entire tree, right? There's some things in here like Warp Ride or Invulnerable Minds that allow you to do a little bit extra damage, but really the only thing that is important to the rest of this tree. Oh, there's two other things, right? The one thing, the big major thing, is cooldown, right? So the rest of the Psyker is all devoted to cooldown shit. Getting Seer's Presence, which gives you 10% flat cooldown, taking Psykinetics Aura, which gives you 50% cooldown regeneration, and then we've got Warp Siphon down at the bottom of the tree, which can give you a 45% reduction cooldown flat off the top if you are like killing targets, which is pretty damn easy to do. And that all together means that cooldowns to the Psyker is a suggestion, right? So imagine, right, we talked before about Scryer's Gaze has a 25-second cooldown. The Venting Shriek has a 30-second cooldown. Bubble has a 40-second or 60-second if you're taking an actual bubble cooldown. This realistically makes the cooldown 1/3 of that. So your Venting Shriek is at 10 seconds. And there's really not much enemies can do to you when you can vent every 10 seconds, when you can use Scryer's Gaze, when you have full uptime on Scryer's Gaze, etc. And what this becomes is, okay, so how do we... This character is dealing so much damage right now, because what this allows you to do is full-time cast with your weapons, as we'll talk about in a second. And then the enemy has to kill you, they have to stop you, and that's where Empathic Evasion comes in. Empathic Evasion is like probably the most broken blue node on the entire Psyker tree. Well, maybe Psykinetics Aura, but Empathic Evasion definitely would be cracked on any other class. So this enables you to dodge all range attacks for 1 second whenever you get a crit. And you would think that doesn't sound like a whole lot, but then you consider the crit rate that this class has and the frequency at which it attacks, then that means that you are very easily keeping this up. And the most obvious way, and this is where we'll swap to weapons, the most obvious way that this happens is with Flame Staff. So there are other staffs that can exploit this, like EK Staff, etc. But if you're attacking very fast, like the Flame Staff does, with each little like particle of flame that comes out counts as a separate attack, and you hit a crit, now you can't take range damage for the next second. And so what happens is, I think that this class was designed to be a like defensive caster, right? Who will be sort of relegated to, oh, here's a big horde, I'll erase the horde with my flame staff. But what this does is it flips that on its head. You can now advance on enemies, and like you only have to worry about the melee enemies. So you shoot the melee enemies with your staff, which of course can stagger and suppress all the ranged enemies, but then all the ranged enemies try to shoot you. However, you are critting those melee enemies with the flames. So now you are immune to those ranged enemies. So you can just advance and walk through the whole level of laying waste everything, flaming everything around you, yada yada yada. You don't care about ranged enemies, you're just looking for those melee ones that are threatening. And then when they do get in close to you, of course, you've got the dueling sword on the backup to pull out and stab. You've got your Force Great Sword if you're going for the melee archetype, but more likely you've got like the Force regular sword if you're doing for a casting setup. And yeah, that just kind of like erases most enemies in the game, because you can just play aggressive on them by just constantly casting, and then when your peril gets high, it's supposed to be a limiting resource, right? But then you just vent it all, or you just quail in like 1 second. It doesn't take any time at all. So you can just constantly be spewing out damage, and this is where this class edges out over the others, right? So Hive Scum, he has rockets and he has like needle pistol, but you do have to reload every once in a while, and you do have to collect rockets, and you will have to pull out your melee weapon to deal with hordes. And outside of like that, like you're dealing with like a big horde or like a lot of enemies, like if the game spawned 100 enemies and he's out of rockets or grenades, well then he's got a little bit of battle ahead of him, right? The Psyker doesn't give a fuck. The Psyker just deals with 10,000 enemies as easily as he deals with 10 enemies. And that is a function of the fact that you are effectively getting to use a resource-free, instant casting, full movement speed, no channel time flamethrower forever, or you can use the Void Blast Staff and do like the circle explosion over and over, which will demolish the horde just all the same. You can also use the EK, the lightning staff, and just spam those bolts across the map and cross-map everything before it even gets to play the game. So yeah, I don't think there's any other class. And then backing all that up, by the way, you'd be using Venting Shriek. Nowhere's no, right? Venting Shriek is the real powerhouse here, because you can Venting Shriek and it goes like 50 meters and it puts 6 stacks of Soul Blaze on everything, and it goes through walls. So you're just walking through the level, flaming, blasting, blowing everything up, Venting Shriek out to the next room. Half the stuff in the next room now dies, withers away and dies from the Soul Blaze. Yeah, so you just become like this, like super mobile, hard to like pin down wizard. So imagine the wizard from like Dungeons and Dragons, but there's no cap on their spells, and also they have like, you know, crazy evasion. Like there's no way to catch them, because then what's going on behind this is, of course, the Psyker is a very mobile class. They get access to all these mobility weapons like the Catachan Blade and the Devil's Claw, but the Dueling Sword. And so you can outmaneuver your foes and make them have to come to you and just keep them running around while you're blasting them for free. And yeah, that's just what the Psyker becomes. So yeah, that's the overall on its OP stuff. Easy use. This is the hardest class in the game. But over time, what they've done, the reason that being the hardest class in the game is a good place to be if you want to be the most OP class in the game is because that power is hidden to Fat Shark. They don't fucking know. They don't know what players are able to do here. They're not looking at the scoreboards of Havoc 40 and seeing that Psykers have like 6 million damage or whatever. They are looking at the win rates and they're seeing, oh, most players die 18 seconds into the game because they blow themselves up with peril. Let's just remove peril as a function. Like, that's literally probably the thought process they're having. This is why Scryer's Gaze has been buffed over and over and over. It's because it's a DPS only ability that offered you no survivability to start, right? But that was already insane. Then they added toughness damage reduction to it. Then they added generate toughness over time to it. Then they made it so it's like cooldown is better. It's yada yada. So they buffed it over and over because players are having low win rates with it, failing to consider the fact that most players are dumpster fires. But as soon as you get that bare minimum prerequisite skill to know how to play X class, it unlocks this untold power. And with the buffs to Psyker, buffing it over and over and over, and making it stronger and stronger and more accessible with power, even I, complete brain-dead imbecile that I am able to mostly fully realize the power of at least Flame Staff Psyker, right? So the value they add to the team, bubble if you're going for bubble, but outside of that, your value added here is that you are the blaster. You are the de facto blaster. You erase hordes. You will eliminate half of the enemies in the game, or more. All the small enemies are gone, and then a ton of damage has been dealt to everything else, because it's like I was saying with the Hive Scum, where you can fight like 3 fights at once, right? You can fight like, you know, a boss and a pack of crushers and a horde kind of at the same time. This is uncapped. If the enemies surround you 360 degrees on all sides, you just spin around 360 degrees, and now you are fighting all those enemies. You are dealing thousands upon thousands of damage to every single enemy at the same time, and that is how the Psyker multiplies their value. Their value is proportional to how intense the engagement is. So players that are like low down or playing Malice, they're like, oh, I don't get it. Why do people say Psyker is so powerful? Then they see what the shit is like that's going down in like Havoc, and they're like, oh my god, okay, I see. Like, yeah, having a perma flamethrower or perma whatever is pretty fucking good, isn't it? So that's the value you add, is you are the ultimate blaster character. And then counters, of course, just be like positioning. It's a matter of positioning. Being wedged in, because the Psyker doesn't have survivability in the way the other classes do. They're pretty evasive, they can dodge out of stuff, but your counter here would be being meleeed and like forced out of position by melee, where to the point where you'd have to stop casting, because the second you stop casting, the second you stop critting, now you're vulnerable to range attacks and then you get annihilated. But by being so high on damage and by already playing back and playing with good positioning and spacing from enemies, you can make certain those encounters never happen. If they do, they're like momentary, because you can swap to the Dueling Sword, get a couple stacks of Uncanny Strike, and watch those Soul Blaze stacks like cook everything alive. So yeah, and then how strong are you at 2,000 hours? I have played with several 2,000 plus hour Psykers, probably with some that are even 5,000 hours. I have never been so useless in my life. I will tell you. I've played Havoc 40s with these players that they just single-handedly run ahead of the team and kill everything. They, if you're using EK staff, you're cross-mapping everything and just blowing it up before it even gets to play. Like on Auric and stuff, it's easy to do, but even on Havoc, it's pretty relevant. Flame staff, it's like, because the enemies can't catch them, so they can't stop the burn. The burn is just going to kill the enemies eventually, so they just kite them around forever and just annihilate everything. So they just run off ahead of the whole team, and then they outmaneuver while keeping those damage stacks at 15. Eventually everything dies. Bada bing, bada boom. Yeah, like you're just a god. Imagine, yeah, you're just flying through the map and just putting a flamethrower and everything. And yeah, it's not okay, because there's no amount of stuff the game can send at you to stop you when you're doing this. The only thing that can slow down Psykers is like bosses. And even bosses, Psykers do pretty good damage against. So yeah, that's the real Psyker power limit right now, and we'll see where they go this year, because maybe they'll get new stabs or something. Who knows? So yeah, there you go, guys. That's the over/under on what I think the most powerful classes in the game are right now. Now, I forgot to mention at the beginning, but go back and edit your comment and predict what you think the order will be, and say, yes, I got it right, and feel like you're smart and smug. And thank you for watching this far. You truly are pretty cool for having listened to me gibber on about this. And let me know if you agree or disagree as well in the comments. And cool, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Mystery out. Bye-bye.